Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Sports, and we have a Springbok announcement coming up later today, so I thought I'd have a stab at the kind of team I would like to see Rassie Erasmus and the coaching staff pick. Very interesting to see the type of conditions we're going to see in Cape Town. It does look very likely to be quite wet, does look very likely to be quite a tactical game that we're going to come up. Probably doesn't look like the kind of dry conditions we would like to play, a bit of an open, expansive game, which will probably actually suit the Springboks, to be honest, especially after last week. I do think we're going to see a little bit of going back to basics to a certain degree. That doesn't mean we're going to not try and score tries and take it on when it's on, but it's about identifying when the opportunities are to have a go and when the opportunities are to maybe scale back a little bit and to maybe not be as aggressive and not sort of play any sort of 50-50 passes, but maybe be a little bit more tight, a little bit more conservative slightly, and just a bit more tactical about the whole thing. And I picked a team that kind of represents that. I also think that recently we've not been seeing the impact off the bench that we would like. We've not been seeing sort of that bomb squad effect. And as a result, I made a couple of picks to try and get us to find a bit of a bomb squad type of impact, to try and see if we can really get players on the second half that are going to make a big impact, that can really sort of up the ante, really. Because I think that's been a big issue with us in the sort of this year. We haven't really always seen that big boost. We saw it, you didn't see it in the first test at Loftus, for example. We didn't see it at all last week at Ellis Park. And I think we need a team that can start off nice and strong, kind of build an innings a little bit, and then replacements that can really make a big difference. We saw, for example, an Angus Bell last weekend for the Wallabies coming on and making a really big and really notable difference. We need to see those type of cameos off the bench. Before I get into my team, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. This is what I've gone with. Right, let's get into it, shall we? Because there's a couple of interesting calls that I think people might disagree with, but I'm going to back myself here. So big news is that there's no Kurt Lawrence, there's no Edward van der Merwe, there's no Peter Steph Toy, there's no Sia Khaleesi. So there are going to be a minimum of 4 changes to the starting lineup, at least, to what we saw last weekend. I think that, we were going to see a different team anyway, but those changes might have necessitated further potential changes within the side itself. In the front row, so I don't know what the situation with the unhindered Vessels is. As far as we understand, he is fit, but I've gone with Bowen Fenter starting. There's method to the madness here. Obviously, Oxenchair is our best prop, but I think that what we've seen from him previously, for example, in the World Cup, when he came on in the second half, he made such a big impact. So that for me is, I think, is a player who I think if we shift to the bench, can really come on the second half and have a really big go and really start to demolish, a Wallaby scrum, which is quite tired. So I think that small switch, I think Bowen Fenton's more than capable of packing it down early on. I think Wilco Low becomes kind of your scrummaging weapon in that first half. He's next to Malcolm Marx, next to Wilco Low, so he's got plenty of experience next to him, despite only playing sort of 2 tests. So I think it's a nice front row, and I think that Oxenchair just gets so much off the bench. We've then got Eben Etzebeth and Ruan Nokia in the second row. I think that Eben was one of our stronger players over the weekend, and Ruan Nokia has been such a good performer recently that I think I'd like to give him a go. Then, interestingly, so I was thinking of going kind of the 6-2 split with the 2 locks. However, with the fact that we've got Peter Steph the toy as well as Sia Khaleesi injured, I've put Franco Moss in the number 7 jersey. Franco Moss had a bit of a slow start to the season so far. I do think he's a much better starter than he is coming off the bench. I just don't think he's always really had that big sort of impact off the bench. I think he's kind of a player that kind of builds and then he's got that kind of, engine that kind of just keeps going. So I also think that given the fact that our lineouts last weekend were a bit of a problem, having a Ruan Nokia, Franco Mostert, Eben Etzebeth, as well as then a Jean-Luc Dupré as well as an option, we suddenly have lots of lineout options, and I'm hoping that will kind of really fix maybe the lineout itself. Marco Verstappen, I think, is an easy selection, the number 6 jersey. And then I've got in the Jean-Luc Dupré in the number 8 jersey. For me, it's between him and Kubas Visa for who they're going to name. And I'd love them to see Jean-Luc Dupré get an opportunity and have a go. He started against the Barbarians, and I thought played pretty well. Then when I come back on maternity leave, he's back in the mix, and I'd really like to see him get a go this weekend. Given the conditions, I've gone with a halfback pairing of Morne van den Berg and Sasha Feinberg in Ngoma Zulu. It's the pair that started together at Loftus. I think that Morne van den Berg is a very solid technical scrum half. He's got a very good kicking game, for example. He's got a good sort of sense of where sort of the game goes. And in what could be more sort of tricky conditions, I think he's a nice option to sort of, again, build an innings, maybe slow it down a little bit, let us really start to dominate up front, let's get a lot of carries into contact, let's wear down that Australian side. And again, I think Grant Williams off the bench in the second half can really up the ante. So this for me is very much my selection is kind of based on what we saw where it's almost sort of gassing out and kind of maybe taking a bit of a shift to having that big impact off the bench once again, because it is an 80-minute game, you know. And what we saw was we went up 22-0, great, but then we just couldn't sustain that pressure. And now I'm thinking I'd rather us almost be a bit more conservative and build a lead and kind of not have a massive lead, but a decent lead at least in sort of the 60th minute, and then be able to really go after them and suffocate them to a certain degree. So I've gone with those two. I've put Sasha back in, and I've got Pollard off the bench as that kind of insurance, really. The wings are pretty straightforward. Maxwell Mpumpy has been called into the squad, but I don't see him taking part. I see it being Chesden, Colby, and Kane and Moody. Damien Dillon for me back onto the side next to Jesse Creel. Damien Willemse at his home ground. I think, again, we're talking about tactical game. Tactical kicking in behind. Probably, you know, not as much running, maybe not as much opportunity to counter-attack. And I think Damien Willemse suits a more sort of structured game at the moment. Then off the bench, Marius van der Merwe. I mean, I think he brings a lot of impact, to be honest. I think probably more impact right now than Bongi Benambi has brought so far. So I've gone with him, Oxenchair, Asenati, and Tlabakanye. I think that's a nice loose front row to bring on. I think Marius van der Merwe offers so much at the breakdown. Genuine breakdown threat, as is Kwagga Smith. So you've got two proper breakdown threats coming on in the second half. You've then got Asenati and Tlabakanye coming off the bench, hopefully packing down nicely at scrums. Then I brought back Archie Snyman. I think you need that kind of X factor. You need a bit of his physicality in the second half as well. Again, when it kind of opens up, Kwagga Smith, Grant Williams, that's players who really up the ante in the second half, which I think we need. And then I got Andre Pollard as a bit of an insurance for if things go wrong, /Fami Zulu, and also to sort of see out the game. And then for me, the big selection here is Andre Esterhuizen, because whilst it is a 5-3 split, it could be deployed as a 6-2. So once again, we've kind of created a bit of a bomb squad vibe in the bench that I've gone with. So I'm hoping that's kind of going to give us that boost in the second half that we need to see out the game. We need to go hard. You know, I think we need to really sort of suffocate the Australians, though. We need to go back to having a big pack. And I think that, you know, the 8 we've listed is very aggressive, very confrontational, and pretty big. You know, Ruan Nokia for Lutiaga might be a bit lighter, but again, you got that engine, for example. I think that Jean-Luc Dupré will bring quite a big impact. And I think that we need somebody like, I mean, Franklin Moss, for example, the engine, does a lot of work when it comes to the rucks. And I think we need that a lot this weekend. Same as Ruan Nokia from a work rate point of view. We need to secure our ball. That's our big thing. We've got to make sure we don't leave our ball carriers isolated and we don't let Fraser McWright have a field day. We've got to make sure that we keep our ball safe, and then we've got to build a bit of an innings. And I think having your Damien Delendis, who's very confrontational, very good at finding a gain line advantage. You've got Chase and Colby, Kane and Moody, Damien Willemse are all good in the air. You've got the options of Damien Willemse, for example, to kick him behind and to sort of do that kind of arm wrestle sort of vibe. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've gone with. What change would you make? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash the like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.